Morning, everybody. Is it morning still? Yes. I'm Jacky Shawcross from the Tree Council, and I'm here with Katie Rafferty today. We're going to be talking to you about biosecurity for CTNs, Community Tree Nurseries. That's a project I've been working on over the last few months. And Katie's going to share more about our Growing Together programme, which is helping to develop the wonderful world of community tree nurseries across the UK. So here we go. So in case you don't know, the Tree Council is a national charity. We work together for the love of trees, basically. We've actually been around for a little bit more than 50 years now. And everything we do is partnership focused, community focused. We have these pillars. We coordinate the tree warden network, which you may have heard of across the country. We have a strong thread of engagement with schools and young learners and getting good people on board with growing trees. We actually do a thread of science and research, which is our kind of motto, really, is to kind of make that really practical. The academic side is great and we love it, but it's got to have a result. So we focus on the practical aspects of that. And we have quite a bit of influence. We work with government agencies and all the rest of it. So that's who we are. And I've been with the Tree Council for about 4 years, did various things before that actually, so I haven't always been in the world of trees. But it's great to be on board with this kind of new thinking, because the world of trees seems to have really exploded in the last 10 years. That's my perception anyway. So as I said, we've been the science and research thread. Oh, what I didn't mention is the Tree Council is really focused on the non-woodland space, the trees outside woodlands, so the trees that people encounter more often. So that's trees in towns and cities, trees along pathways, trees at service stations, you know, all those kind of non-woodland trees. So we focus on that. But there was a time when we didn't know much about trees outside woodland and how to grow them, and if there are any difference from the kind of commercial forestry sector sort of thing. So actually my major work over the time I've been with the Tree Council has been on this Trees Outside Woodland project, which had multiple threads, different pilots for different kinds of tree establishment. So we did do an urban trees establishment pilot, for example, looking at Miyawaki planting, if anybody's interested in that. And various other things, trees on farms. There's a booklet on the table at the back there, which you're welcome to take away with you, which was the result of that piece of research. But this community tree nursery sector is something that we didn't know much about. I think there was a thought that there were people out there growing lovely trees, but nobody really knew how many, what they were doing, and all of that. So we embarked on a big piece of research with partners at DEFRA, Natural England, and local authorities who were working on this project with us. And we learnt some things. Forest Research were commissioned under that project to do some research. They discovered that, this is a few years ago now actually, but they discovered that there were thought to be about 80 odd community tree nurseries which were growing something in the order of 250,000 trees a year at that time, all, you know, kind of all across the UK. And there was definitely appetite for them to grow more. And in fact, now we actually think that there's probably even more than that now, and we think perhaps it might be even up to them growing maybe up to something like 500,000 trees a year, which is quite a number of trees to put out into the environment. But what we did discover under that programme a few years ago is that there wasn't a lot of kind of attention, let me put it that way, on the biosecurity element of growing trees and effectively growing them and then spreading them out into the community. So that is why we're doing a bit more research on that now. So I'm going to talk about that. But before I do, just outside of coming out of that project, we did produce a few biosecurity resources. In fact, those top three on the left are from some other partners that we've worked with, the University of Coventry, who've produced these amazing resources that are specifically aimed at the community tree nursery sector. So all these things do exist. And there are also other kinds of video guidance and YouTube videos. More Trees has been mentioned. They're an excellent resource for things, and we've worked with them as well in the past, and continue to do so. but it's kind of quite a lot of bitty bits of information, and it's hard to understand what do you actually do then. So can you just show me what to do? So in case you don't know, we've said the word biosecurity quite a few times today. This is what's on the government website about what biosecurity actually is. I'm just going to read it out. Biosecurity refers to a set of precautions that aim to prevent the introduction and spread of harmful organisms. These include non-native tree pests, such as insects, and disease-causing organisms, which we call pathogens, which are things like bacteria and fungi and even viruses, So when we talk about biosecurity, we're talking about that potential to spread something potentially catastrophic. I really don't want to scare everyone because it sounds really, the graph I'm about to show you is a little bit scary, but it really just, biosecurity is just, so what do we actually do then to stop the spread? And we all kind of understand a bit more about that now. We've kind of got that language a little bit from our years with the COVID pandemic. But we always do have to bear in mind that we are basically, if we are a community tree nursery or a commercial tree nursery, what we are doing is going out, collecting things, walking in shoes all around the countryside, bringing it into one condensed area, growing it, and then spreading it all around again. So just bear that in mind. That's basically what we're talking about. Why do we need to care about it? So these are some stats and a horrible graph. As you can see, in the last 16 years, there has been, probably it's more like 20 years now, but a real ramping up of the kinds of diseases and pests that have come to the UK and spread around. So this one right over here, Dutch elm disease. I'm sure a lot of you remember the impact of that. That's actually came before I was born, so I've never lived in a landscape in the UK with loads of lovely elm trees. So that's a kind of shifting baseline, which is just completely gone from the collective memory for some of us. And then we've got these newer ones coming in: horse chestnut leaf miner, oak processionary moth. Some of you may have heard of that one. Asian longhorn beetle, ash dieback's on here somewhere, and various Phytophthora diseases. And obviously, we've mentioned ash dieback quite a bit. It was potentially really devastating to the treescape in the way that Dutch elm disease was. But there are some, tender roots of a bit of optimism about that. So it's not all catastrophe, but it does actually have a tangible effect. It costs local authorities millions of pounds if there are trees outside woodlands along roadways or along railway networks, etc., that could potentially, the trees become extremely brittle and fall and die. You have to do something about these things. So we want to stop it coming all together. Oh, I didn't know I'd put a animation on that. Okay, so understanding biosecurity for CTNs is clearly quite important, but it is a bit technical. And so, as I said before, we're all about trying to translate some of that technical detail into just practical steps. The piece of research that I've been working on over the last few months has been trying to understand what it means for CTNs and to then move forward into a phase 2 to give CTNs some more practical, tangible things, your own sort of toolkit to kind of how to handle this thing. And I've interviewed a few of you in the room as part of my research, so thank you very much to those of you who I've spoken to and those of you who filled out my survey. This is my idea. This was what I came to when I first started looking at the shape of biosecurity. I'm not actually a biosecurity expert, but partners on the project are. So we've been working with the Tree Health Centre at the Yorkshire Arboretum, Ferra Science, who all these people know what they're talking about. But when I first did a bit of a deep dive on it, this was my articulation of how it looks. So you could be any different type of CTN on the left-hand side. And we now know that there are a wide diversity of CTNs. Some are big, some are micro, some grow 50 trees a year, 100 trees a year in their back garden. Some are maybe grow 25,000 trees, but they still have a community focus and they're still doing it with volunteers. So you could be any of those things. You might not even sell trees. You might give them away exclusively. And then there's this kind of nest or cloud of potential biosecurity regulations. And do you have to register to be a professional operator? What are the notifiable pests? What do we do about wood packaging material? The SOPRA, I'll come on to that. Reviewing and monitoring activities, inspections. Do you have to do stuff? There's an inevitable admin burden to doing all of that stuff. Tracking and tracing, as has already been mentioned today. All of that does inevitably, as I say, have admin considerations and cost burdens, which can potentially be quite significant for a volunteer group of community tree nurseries. So this is my articulation. So I sort of imagine that a CTN of any variety would have to sort of fiddle their way through all that maze of stuff in the middle to come out the other end to demonstrate that they are operating in a biosecure way. And the phrase for that is full compliance with the Plant Health Management Standard. There are different ways to prove that you are compliant with the Plant Health Management Standard. Plant Healthy Certification is one of those. Ready to Plant, the voucher scheme that Ferroscience run is another one of those. And there's a thing called the Biosecure Procurement Exception, which I can talk to you about if you like later on. But so this project was basically about trying to sort of help CTNs navigate all of that, from moving from the left to the right, from a position of there being a bit of variability in the CTN sector of compliance with the Plant Health Management Standard to full compliance with the Plant Health Management Standard. What is the Plant Health Management Standard? It's nine standards, which have been pulled together by a group of people, the Plant Health Alliance, a variety of different organisations with a stake in ensuring that good plant health and biosecurity. So clearly there are 9 of these, and each one has its own sort of subcategories, and in fact there are 33 when you add them all together. So already we've got quite technical and complex, which frankly is a bit too much for me. We have regulatory requirements, which are things like registering as a professional operator and notifying the authorities via the forestry reproductive material kind of authorization process for when you're going out doing seed collecting. There's having a plant biosecurity policy, and on and on. I won't go through them all, but basically each one of these is quite important, and that they all together constitute the Plant Health Management Standard. Number 4 is an interesting one. That's what SOPRA stands for, Site and Operations Pest Risk Analysis. It sounds a bit daunting, but all it is just making sure that you've assessed your site and your operations, what you're actually doing for the risk of introducing and spreading plant health, and then responding accordingly. That's all it actually is. So we don't need to get too hung up about it. But there we are. That's that. The plant, in case you're wondering, because it has come up as part of my research, the Plant Health Management Standards have been set by and agreed by all of these organisations. It's not just a DEFRA thing. It's a kind of all of the people who are involved in plant production, and it's for all plants as well, not just trees. And it's under review. They review it every so often. We're on version 1.3, I think, at the moment. So as I said, I've been doing a few workshops and interviewing people for the last few months about biosecurity, and I'm actually quite pleased to say that CTNs do have they are a very diverse cohort, CTNs, but they do have an understanding of what biosecurity is. So they say things like this: it's about not propagating or spreading diseases that may or may not be present in an area. It means keeping the nursery safe. That's an interesting thought, because it's also about keeping the nursery safe and not spreading it outside the nursery. And that's quite a long one, but basically it's about, we don't want to spread things by accident. Have a bit of an active, proactive approach, and know what you're doing. And that thing about recording and tracing is quite important. So if there ever is an outbreak, as we know, for example, with the case of meningitis in Canterbury, you do need to be able to kind of track it and trace it to stop it in its tracks. And the same is true of tree diseases. So this is a hot off the press view of what I think I'm going to suggest we do after having done my bit of research. I was charged with coming up with something like a framework that we could build on for some practical examples to help CTNs with what to do. This is just my view. It's not, this is just my headspace. I think we need to sort of have some focused examples around what do you do about things coming into a CTN. So that's, you probably can't read the screen there, but there's plant material can come in to your CTN, seeds come in, plant material can come in on your boots or your car tires, and in wood products that you might bring to site. It can come in water and, all of that. But I think we need some really practical examples to help support people understand how stuff actually does come in. Then there's stuff to do with it moving things around inside the nursery. And that's to do with plant care, nursery processing, nursery protocols, nursery management. So plant care, just, using clean water. It's kind of obvious and you all kind of know this stuff, but you just have to be kind of on it and mindful of the fact that when we are producing and growing trees, although it's in a lovely, for a community purpose, we are still growing things to put out into the environment, even if we're putting them in the very local environment. So we have to just be quite mindful of it all. So yeah, there's progression around a nursery, moving plants from A to B when you've grown them on, done the next thing. You need to have good nursery protocols. You need to have kind of regular monitoring of your trees in a kind of systematized way. Record keeping is quite an important one. If you ever need to demonstrate that you've been doing some really good biosecurity practices. And you actually do need to do weeding and path maintenance, because even some plant weeds in a nursery can harbour some of those, can be like a breeding ground for some of those more microscopic organisms that could eventually infect your trees. And I can't undersell the point about signage and labelling, understanding, because with the voluntary sector, people come in, they may not have been here before, but then they just need to know the difference between, this is the pile of fresh pots that have been cleaned and we know they're safe to use, just use those, versus this pile over here kind of looks clean, but it's not really been washed yet, but it's basically clean. You really just want people to use the properly clean one rather than the looks a bit clean one. So just really basic stuff like signage, policies and record keeping. And then obviously the stuff about taking your trees out. So maybe a little check before your trees leave the nursery. Record where they're going, that's quite key. So if something crops up, there's always a train of traceability back. Disposing of organic materials is an interesting one as well. A lot of CTNs do their own composting, which is great, but it tends to not really get hot enough to necessarily kill all the microscopic stuff. So that's something to think about. And water drainage is also something to think about, including where you've washed your boots. I know, for example, they clearly would have a very good setup at the Tree Health Centre, but they have a water trough where you clean your boots in your water trough, and it collects the silt. The water goes through a drain, and it's actually UV treated, I think, and then periodically they collect the silt. I'm not saying that's necessarily the sort of thing that a small community organisation could do, but you just have to be mindful of it. And the thing to do, the thing about it is it has to be appropriate for an appropriate level of protection for your operation, for your site and your operation. And that's the part that's really difficult, because everyone's really different, and especially in the CTN sector. So it's hard to say you all need to do this. There are one or two things that I think you probably should all do, which is wash your boots on entry and exit, that kind of thing. Which is why I brought my little visual aids along with me. This is a boot pick, in case nobody's seen one. You are actually supposed to get all the gunge out from in between your boots, give them a good proper wash off with a brush, try and get them dry if possible, before you arrive onto site, and ideally before you leave as well. It's this, this just a simple hard plastic brush is fine for that. And as lovely as it is to use beautiful wooden plant labels, I think it's probably worth thinking about plastic ones. I don't want to recommend plastic, but they're just much less likely to harbour pests and diseases than kind of wood, which whilst when you've purchased it probably has been appropriately treated, perhaps there's always a chance that it will rot and decay and then harbour some difficult stuff. So as I say, it's a bit technical, but there's a lot to think about. So I just wanted to share this thinking with you because I think it's important to get to a place where we can find so just literally tell you what to do, so what do I do then? That's the direction of the thinking so far. This actually already exists. This is on the Tree Growers Guide website, which is a website and a booklet. We've got some spare copies over at the table there you can take away with you. I hope you've already seen that because it shows you tells you how to grow a wide variety of trees from seed. On the website, we have this sort of example possible pathways, which is a kind of example version of a site and operations pathway analysis. And it has along all the top here, possible, on my bubble diagram that I just showed you, the possible entry points of in are all along the top here. This middle section is the movement around, and then this bottom section is the movement out. So we've got, people and vehicles. So the information is kind of there. It just needs a bit more of a kick to kind of make sure everyone is really understanding the kind of minimum things that they need to do. And I personally think that really needs practical examples. So do have a look at the Tree Growers Guide website. There are a lot of resources on there to have a look at. Like I say, I think it does need practical examples. In case you've never noticed, wood pallets come with a proof of a document that they've been heat treated and the wood has been treated. But that's at the point of kind of first delivery. If it gets reused, there's always a chance, as I've said, that it can break down and then be a place to harbour pests and diseases. And that's an example of a boot wash if you've never seen one. That's got a lid. There are some hard, there's a blue one there and a yellow one there. Like I say, it would be great to have those at the entry and exit points. And it's really important to have good water storage. It's covered, it's lidded, nothing can fall in. Ideally, it's shaded from the sun as well. All of this. So I personally think we just need to give CTNs these practical versions with visual images, maybe some videos of how to do it. The other side of the thing that is the site and operations risk analysis is understanding what your potential risks might be. And there is the place you go for that is a DEFRA website, basically, which is, let me put this gently, it's a little bit difficult to navigate. But this is a much kind of easier place to find out about what potentially could be affecting the trees that you might be growing. Make yourself familiar with that, because not only, excuse me, in the site that you're operating is biosecurity important. If you are interested in trees and you're going out into the environment looking for trees and seeds and just enjoying lovely trees, if you can learn some of these signs and symptoms, you can be eyes on the ground as well. And if you report things to Tree Alert, all the better. Do have a look at the observatory website. It tells you with lots of pictures and nice explanations of what the potential pests and diseases are. So yeah, as I say, I am literally, I've finished writing the report on Wednesday, so we are hot off the press. The next steps for me are to try to move this work forward into a phase 2 where we do actually develop the resources further and get some more practical tools for community tree nurseries. But as I say, there are some resources out there already. Tree Growers Guide, there's loads of resources on the Yorkshire Arboretum website as well. And there are posters and there are things like that. So do take a look. So that's that really. We can perhaps do some questions now, or perhaps I'll pass over to Katie and we can come back to it later. Katie's going to share with us what we've been doing at the Tree Council with Community Tree Nurseries. It's all kind of been a bit of a launch pad from that big Trees Outside Woodlands project, hasn't it?
It certainly has, thank you.
There you go.
My name is Katie. I am the schools programme manager, but I have been involved in the Growing Together programme for around about the last 10 months, maybe a year or so. And I was delighted to hear everyone who's spoken so far talk about how they are learning, and that a few years ago they knew nothing, because I am very much learning about CTNs, about tree growing. Not that many years ago, I was working in a secondary school before I joined the Tree Council as the schools programme manager. And our schools programme was funded by M&G PLC, who funded that for 5 years, really enthusiastic, wanted to continue to do work with the Tree Council, and was looking for options that have an additional community focus as well as schools. And together we have created the Growing Together programme, the idea of growing healthy, locally sourced trees in each community. And that is now being funded by M&G, and that's why I've kind of started this learning journey, and I'm very much on that learning journey, but hopefully can share a little bit of information about what we've been doing this year in our pilot year of the Growing Together programme, what we hope to continue to do, and how perhaps some of your organisations can get involved. As Jackie mentioned, very much it comes out of the back of that Trees Outside Woodland research that Jackie and others did to look at the impact of community tree nurseries on expanding trees outside woodland. And it just highlighted some really important effects of CTNs, of the amazing work that's been done, of the individual stories across the UK of kind of fantastic achievements. And we wanted to be able to support that to grow further. As we were developing that, we had things like the Strong Roots report came out, talking about, you know, the shortages of certain seeds, about needing more rootstocks being propagated in the UK, about the risks of importing and moving trees, etc., which just gave us even more impetus to get something started to try and help more communities to grow their trees. And so, based upon the research that Jackie mentioned about that number that came from that Trees Outside Woodland research, we are aiming over 3 years to double the number of tree nurseries in communities, including schools as well. So community group schools, voluntary groups of people coming together to grow trees. And that's based upon that number that Jackie mentioned of 80 CTNs growing 250,000 trees. So we're trying to help other organisations get started and start what will hopefully be a really impactful tree growing journey for them. So far in our pilot year, you can see one of these maps has been designed by a designer, and one of them is me playing on Google. So this first one is the designer one, and they're the kind of the new organisations that we've helped within this pilot year to establish a community tree nursery. This one was me playing on Google, and the yellow ones are the same, so they're the new ones. But we've also helped support existing CTNs as well, which are the green ones, and we're trying to help some of the kind of more established CTNs help others locally, which is a little bit like what Paul was mentioning with the mentoring of CTNC. So I'll explain the different levels of support. So as I mentioned there, we're trying to help organisations who want to grow trees in their community to get started. We're trying to help those who are already doing this, have been going for at least a year, to expand what they're doing or to improve their biosecurity practices, for example, so that they can grow more or grow more safely. And we're looking to support those who have already got a really good setup, a really strong setup, and want to help others to do something similar in their community. And we're calling them those hub CTNs. So in terms of those new CTNs, we are working with community groups, charities, not-for-profits and schools across the UK. We have a small team based in different parts of the UK. We have a team member in Scotland, in the north, team members in the south, and we are reaching out to organisations that have expressed an interest previously or that we already know, and we're kind of trying to develop what they do to help them start tree growing. Some of them are organisations who are already doing a growing of some sort, like you mentioned here at Growing Well, growing produce and fruit and vegetables for the community, and would like to expand into tree growing. Some of them have got a site that has been unused and they want to use it for something really positive. Others have tree planting plans and they want to find locally sourced trees to do that, and so they want to grow them themselves. So all very different, all completely unique. Like I say, some of them are kind of friends of parks groups, some of them are allotment societies, schools, a real range. Some of them are residential facilities for people, adults with learning difficulties and additional needs. So really, really diverse. And that's been one of the really rewarding things for me, is getting to know these different organisations and their reasons for getting involved. That team that I mentioned that work remotely, apparently, remotely that was meant to be, they are going around meeting these organisations that want to set something up, and they are having a conversation. It's very much us being involved in the planning stage and offering support where we can. We're aware that some people are really enthusiastic about supporting the environment and would really love to grow thousands of trees, but might not necessarily have anywhere for thousands of trees to grow, or to be planted out to. And so it's very much working at the beginning of what are we wanting to achieve, what's the end goal, and how can we try to support you with doing that. So we are giving advice all the way through. We've got this 5-step process, the planning and research element of it, creating a tree nursery in terms of resources, facilities, gathering, processing seed, how they would grow and care, and where their planting can go. So we want an idea of that, ideally, or to help organisations have an idea of those things before they get started, just so that we know that we are not going to have 1,000 horse chestnut trees and nowhere to put them, or people are kind of gathering something just because they want to grow trees without having that end goal in mind. So we are supporting in person. We're also supporting with capital items. At the minute, the average for this pilot year has been around £500 worth of resources that we are providing on average to these new organisations. And that is things like raised beds, irrigation. They're probably the most common. Some are doing things like propagating rootstocks for fruit trees and grafting fruit trees. So some tools and things like that to support with those. It's all very unique and very bespoke, depending upon what that tree nursery wants to do. Some are using raised beds, some are using root trainers, some are doing air pruning tree tables, which was new to me, which is just like a raised bed that's on legs, which is air pruning with mesh underneath, etc., so that the tap roots and roots hit the air and die off. And that's the kind of method they're using. Some are using air pruning pots and things, so they're all very different, and a lot of them are driven by the passion of what those groups of people want to do, and we want to support that as long as it's kind of, you know, meeting their goal and growing trees in hopefully as healthy a way as possible. So we're also going to be doing some training workshops, resources. We're delivering some training sessions in person with groups of volunteers at these organisations. We're also offering online support to resources. And like Jacky said before, we know there's a lot of support and information out there. We don't want to reinvent what's already out there. So if there are great resources that exist, then it's pointing people into the direction of them, or ideally pulling them together into one place so we can say these great resources are being produced by all of these different organisations, but they'll help you with your tree growing journey. So yeah, just to mention some of the different things that we have been supporting with this year and continue to support with. And just an example, one that I mentioned earlier, I was at this school this morning, the Lake School, and we've heard talk of Isaac, who I feel is like a bit of a star who's not here because he's been mentioned a few times now, working for Cumbria Wildlife Trust. But both Emily at the school and Isaac approached us. We had some online sessions earlier this year about the Growing Together programme. Emily was really keen to start tree growing and work with Isaac to support the Skiddaw project. And so we went around the school this morning at 8:30, just finalising. Isaac had already been and had a look at potential sites, finalising a site where they are going to start growing some trees on their site. So they're going to have a couple of raised beds, have some irrigation. Again, we've worked with different organisations with different forms of irrigation, but using rainwater harvesting to grow some trees that will then be able to contribute to the that wider project. And for us, that's a really, really great project to support because there is a definite end goal of where these trees are going to go, and it's working with other partners, which really adds strength. We are not in every single location. There are 5 of us. We can't be in every part of the UK at all times to be able to provide support. So working with other partners where we can give some resources, we can give some support, but also when we're not there, there are also other partners who can give support, that really strengthens it. And with these new CTNs, as we work with them, we hope that they will kind of go on and to be the established CTNs that we're supporting in future years. Just another one here that's quite different. So this is an organisation near Sheffield called Kids Plant Trees that was established by a group of mums who wanted to engage their children and local children more in trees and tree planting. And they do a significant amount of tree planting across, it's initially started in Sheffield, but all of South Yorkshire now. And at the minute, those trees all come in from other sources where they're provided for schools, which is really positive, but they would like to grow more of those trees locally that they're planting in their local communities with young people. So they have a piece of land. At the minute, it is an empty piece of land, and they are wanting to establish a tree nursery so that the trees that they plant with their young people around South Yorkshire, more of them are locally and sustainably grown rather than delivered to them. So that's their plan. So these are the new CTNs, just a couple of examples. And like I say, we're also supporting existing CTNs. So our hope is that once we've supported a CTN to establish, then we will be able to support them as an existing CTN to grow and develop slightly. So a school that might have a couple of beds now and some irrigation might develop more beds or more systems or kind of different methods of cell-grown trees in the future, also supported by the Growing Together programme. So if a CTN has been in existence for a year or more, they could apply for our small grant scheme as part of the Growing Together programme, and they can receive up to £700 worth of capital items to help them with their CTN. So that might be they want to improve, add more growing beds, they might want to improve the path system for accessibility for some of their volunteers, they might need to have raised workspaces for some of their volunteers. A lot of them were looking for materials to help with biosecurity, really varied. This was really fascinating for me in that learning journey experience that I mentioned, reading the applications from CTNs across the UK and understanding just how diverse they are, from tiny islands off the coast of Scotland who need to get everything there on a small boat, to kind of big outfits that were growing 40,000 but with such a tiny number of volunteers. The different stories that I learned about from these CTNs was really inspiring and a really lovely thing to be able to support with a boost of some sorts to kind of help them in the work that they're doing. So at the minute, like I said, this year has been a pilot. We're at that review stage, but we definitely will be continuing with this element. So we will be sharing some more information in the coming weeks and months about when we will be looking to support more existing CTNs again with the small grant scheme in the way that we did this year. This year, helped by Jacky's project, we were also able to support not just with some bespoke biosecurity infrastructure that they requested, but also a biosecurity starter kit. And that's something that we're offering to all of our new CTNs as well, so that when we are starting these initial planning conversations, we're not just talking about which way is the sun, where is your water coming from. We're talking about biosecurity from the start. Even when schools and young people without, we don't want to scare or alarm some of these organisations who might never have heard the word biosecurity or considered it. But like Jackie said, actually talking about things like having a bubble and thinking about kind of how viruses spread is something that is more understood by the majority of the population now. And just being able to kind of talk about some of this and get the good practices in as they're establishing CTNs, having posters up from the start, understanding that we're going into our tree growing area, we're going to clean our boots, etc. from the start, is a really positive thing. And so that has been really popular, that CTN Biosecurity starter kit uptake from existing CTNs. And we're hoping to do some online training sessions as well for existing and new CTNs to share a bit more information about that. Just an example of one of the CTNs that has applied and is kind of receiving support to expand a little bit what they're doing. This is a Yorkshire-based CTN who is part of the, now I've forgotten, CTNC, the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative. And they do a lot of, their site's wonderful. It wasn't this sunny when I did visit, but it's a really lovely site on the top of a very windy hill. And they do some lovely open day sessions as well, actually, so keep a lookout if you do follow. But they do a lot of bare root growing, and they would like to do some more growing of cell-grown trees. They do a lot of planting in schools, want to expand that more, and wanted to increase their capacity to grow cell-grown trees more. So that was what they were looking for support with in terms of their infrastructure. They are all so different, and what the needs are so different. So we try really hard not to be prescriptive and to kind of support each organisation to meet their own individual goals. That one should say hubs. So we are aware that, like I mentioned, we are not in every part of the country all of the time. And there is so much expertise out there. I will never claim to be an expert in community tree nurseries, as I am not involved day to day in one. But there are so many people who do really have so much time that they're being given to theirs. They've got so much expertise. They've got so much experience. They've tried growing willow in Tetra Packs and in the ground and in containers, and they can share their experience in a way that I never will be able to. And so we were really are looking where possible to form these clusters that has got an experienced CTN or a hub, as we're referring to them, at the centre, who is able to support some of those that are growing nearby. We understand that time is precious, and really hard to kind of continue to work on funding their own CTN and supporting others. So we are trying to support some hubs where we can give them some resources so that they can use some of their time to run sessions for other people, to go and do visits. That site that I mentioned, Kids Plant Trees in Sheffield, that is just a bare site. They are really going to benefit from somebody who's established from a windy field on the top of a hill, a CTN, to go and say, this is what we did, this is how you might do it. And so that is giving a little bit of resource to some of these really experienced CTN hubs to share that experience more widely, because we want this to be sustainable. We want this to have longevity, of whether we are giving them a phone call on an email, but it's all about local communities, and it's all about doing something locally. So to build those local networks, we think really strengthens the work that the CTNs are doing. So that's kind of the third layer of support that we are funding through the Growing Together programme. So if you are involved in a community tree nursery, if you are looking to develop what you're doing in an existing community tree nursery, then we will be sharing more information about the small grant scheme that we'll be running again this year. If you know of organisations that would be interested in establishing community tree nurseries, and there's loads of different ways that might happen. It may be that you're kind of a bigger CTN and there are other small kind of like pilot sites that you're interested in growing trees on your behalf, and they need resources to establish as a micro CTN. Then we will be looking for new CTNs to support in year 2 of our programme shortly, once we finished our review. And in the meantime, we do have lots of resources, like Jackie's mentioned, the Tree Grows Guide website. we are looking to kind of provide a bit more of a hub to pull together some of the resources and to help point a little bit more swiftly to the right resources in the right place for people. So we're continuing to develop that. But if you've just got a general question, or you want to find out more, or I wasn't clear and I was waffling on, or there's somebody else that you might want to share an email address with, if you email growingtogether@thetreecouncil.org.uk, we will answer any of those questions and look to support in any way that we can. So a number of people have done that recently, so I'm currently in the process of visiting many of these organisations who would like some more support or would like to establish a CTN. So we will be reaching out to kind of spring, summer to get new organisations on board, ready for the next seed gathering season and cuttings and grafting. And yeah, just some resources that are on there, those steps that I mentioned, the Tree Growers Guide. Community Tree Nursery Collaborative is a really useful resource. I mentioned that I have not established a CTN myself, but I am in that Facebook group for the Community Tree Nursery Collaborative, and I'm learning so much just by looking at the posts that are being shared with the updates of the CTNs, what they're doing now, making me wonder if I can do that now in my part of the country or if I need to wait a bit longer. But I'm learning lots just by reading what those guys are sharing. And as well, just in general, in terms of tree planting and the fact that you guys are generally going to be interested in that too. Just keep an eye on the Tree Council for grants in general.